All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to class number 3. On tonight's topic is passages of love. I know that sounds a little like, what exactly is that? But we're glad you came back for number 3. We have a few people that just joined us tonight for the first time. Welcome. Good to have you with us. And we're going to follow our usual format tonight. We're going to start with some teaching, and then we're going to hear from our lovely panel that we have planned, and then we'll go to the table. So glad you came back.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll get started. I know people are starting to settle down. Everyone get your coffee. I love it. It looks like a bunch of wildebeest at the watering hole. I'm talking to you, Oleg. All right, bow your heads. Let's pray.
That's on camera.
Father, we love you. God, you are incredibly, incredibly good to us. God, you are relational and have been for all of eternity. And so we look to you, the Creator, on how to do this thing that you made and how to do it in a God-honoring, loving way. God, today as we look at your word and we look at the one across from us that you've given us, or the future of the one that you give us, God, we just ask, can we just submit our hearts, our minds, our plans to you and say, we want to trade in our ways for your ways. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. If you haven't seen it before, here's our vision statement for doing this particular class and for the series we're doing on Sunday morning that kind of accompanies this thing. We want to cast compelling vision for the beauty and the transformative power of Christ-centered relationships in a hurting world. Everything God does, He's designed His universe, He does through relationships. Relationships are an expression of who He is. Pastor Jason said on Sunday, God's even in relationship with Himself, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. When Jesus appeared on the bank of the Jordan, the heavens opened, the Spirit came down like a dove and a voice from heaven. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. So we have this incredible model of coexistence and affirmation and mutual submission that is found in the Godhead itself. And then we have this mystery that we're going to circle back to over and over, this thing called marriage, where that mystery is even deeper and extends throughout the earth. So
yeah, and tonight we want to talk about and dialogue about the passages of love. I know that almost sounds like a bad Harlequin romance, if you remember those. And you can see the title, and then a guy needs more shirt on, and the passages of love. But what we find is, yeah, sorry, was that too good of a picture?
I got to come back from that. Go ahead.
What we find is most of us come into this properly, I think, in our culture from a place of romance. There are other cultures that say, no, this is actually an arrangement, and we tell you and you from the families this to get together. But we come up from a place of romance and excitement and passion. But those passages come differently. That's the first passage, and hopefully we can maintain some of that throughout our life. But there will be other feelings and transitions that we go through.
Anybody David Bowie fan? Remember back in the day, changes, right? Yeah. Sorry, I'll date you right there. But that song, changes are a part of life. The only thing that's consistent is nothing stays the same. It's consistently changing all the time. So the thing about tonight's content is we're going to cover everything from just married or all the way to the end of the spectrum. The panel is going to represent hopefully some of the spectrum. But so you may be sitting here listening like, I've only been married a year and everything's fine so far. Just give it time. I'm not saying it's going to change for the worse.
We have a message of hope.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I hope you make it.
Yeah. Good luck with that. No, so here's the thing. There's a passage of Scripture that we often use in a marriage ceremony. I'm sure you've heard it if you've been to a wedding that's done by a pastor or somebody like that. And it's out of 1 Corinthians. Can you guess what this says? Here it is. It says, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous, or boastful, proud, or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. As I read this, it's typically at the end of the ceremony. They're looking in each other's eyes. He can't wait to kiss the bride. They can't wait to get to the reception and go on the honeymoon. But I want to finish the passage. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. And then I finish with these words. If I do a ceremony, I almost always finish. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That you read that last line there. I have one more piece to this. Yeah. This is futuristic. That statement is like, it's kind of like you're going to need this in the future. Because right now, the love is flowing, the romance is flowing, the vibe is there, we are excited, but we're going to need this kind of love, this enduring love, to really go the distance because of changes.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, sorry, I should have said this earlier, but on your table is some fill-in-the-blank notes.
Yeah.
Use those or don't use those, depending on what kind of a learner you are. But if you'd like them, you're welcome to follow along and fill in some blanks along as we go. And the first one is this: what if God designed marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy? Most of us don't go into marriage thinking, yes, this is what I'm after, holiness. We think, this feels good. I like the way this feels.
I'm happy when I'm with you.
Yeah, there's just something about this, and it's making me happy. But if that is the goal, then what about when happy is no longer there? What about on a not so happy day, and those days come? What keeps this together? It has to be bigger than happiness. And what we find in Scripture is that the marriage union makes us, it's part of God's process in making us holy, the sanctification process.
Happy is a relatively new concept in our culture. I mean, happiness has always been around, but the pursuit of happiness is an American thing. You know, it's almost like we literally put it in the Bill of Rights. I have a right to be happy. And if I'm not happy with you, for whatever reason, then I'm out, or I'm going to write this off, or I'm going to break the contract. Now, I'm not anti-happy. I mean, I hope you're happy, and I like to be happy. But happiness isn't really, it's not like a core biblical value. Now, joy is another conversation. But what we're after here is this idea tonight of longevity, of going this distance. And I think there's certain mindsets that we have to wrap our minds around in order to weather the changes. I saw a bumper sticker years ago. It was so good, I had to write it down. And here's what it says. The bumper sticker said, oops, what did I do? Am I going the wrong direction, David? Help me, I'm just such a nerd. Here's what it said. Wanted, meaningful overnight relationship. What's wrong with that statement? I mean, meaningful overnight relationship, right? Because we laugh because we know what that means. It's cynical. But I think sometimes people have a mentality that this is just going to be quick and easy and nothing's ever going to change. But we're just going to walk through some stuff tonight and talk about what are those changes look like.
Bumper stickers are just that. They're just this quick one-liner. Like, oh yeah, I remembered that. Bruce will never forget that. But our lives aren't bumper stickers. They're more like books. And books have different chapters. You know, a book that every chapter is the same, you give up. You're not going to finish that. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And somewhere in the middle are these times where like, oh, this is getting hard. How is this going to resolve? And you start to realize when you start looking at your life and you've lived a little life, you can go backwards and go, I think I could name that chapter now. I couldn't figure it out when I was in it. But that's when I met the villain. That's when it got hard. That's when, someone opposed me. Or that's when, this is when sickness hit. And that was a time of endurance. So we're going to talk about that. What are the chapters of our relationships, and how do we figure those things out?
What is a novel without tension? It's just you toss it. You don't stick with it. A movie without tension? So this book or this novel that we're writing together as a husband and wife, like he said, has these chapters, but there's things lurking in the next chapter that you don't know about. I don't like to read ahead. I like to just kind of take it one chapter at a time, right? So the challenge that we want to throw out here is this, is that we are married, I am married, it doesn't matter how long I've been married, to an ever-growing and ever-changing person. Now, you have chapters or seasons, maybe moments in our marriage where you just like to freeze. And can we just stay here for years? But we can't. I don't know where those were when the bills were paid or the kids slept through the night or, the sex was great or whatever it was. But there's part of us that says, I just don't want to move from here. I want to stay here. Understandable, but probably not super realistic.
If you're a parent, you know what we're talking about, because there's these moments sometimes when you want to freeze your kid, right? Sometimes I'm like, I just want you to stay a baby. I want you to be my baby, but that kid's not going to stay a baby. And if you're a wife, you're like, I don't want you to be a baby. I didn't want to marry a baby. I want you to grow up. I want you to be a man. And the reality is you're going to change. Who you married today, who you're with today, isn't going to be the same person 10 years from now. I don't mean the name should be different. I mean what they've gone through in those 10 years will change them. And you're going to have to change with that and communicate through that change, like we were talking last week.
I love Pam's Brown, this author's description of two people who have weathered the storms together, like two sailors who have shared the battles against fall weather. I don't know about you, but I don't grow. My wife and I, we haven't grown through great times. I mean, I've enjoyed good times, right? But if we're honest, we don't really grow through good times. We grow through tough times. And again, so I love this quote because she's describing two people by the look in their eyes that have hung in there and grown and dug in and said, I'm, for better or for worse, I'm in this. So,
yeah, and there's something about that idea too of the storms, right? The sailors realize, like, we're in one weather right now, but that can change like that. That can change like that, and that's what we find. There's change inside of the marriage. Who you married is going to change because they're a growing person, and then the circumstances that you live in are going to change because we live in a dynamic world.
Listen to this author. We never know who we marry. We just think we do. Or even if we do first marry the right person, just give it a while and he or she will change. For marriage being the enormous thing that it is means we're not the same person after we've entered into it. The primary challenge of marriage is learning how to love and care for the stranger to whom you find yourself married. That's fascinating. You can take a picture of that if you want. We can give it to you later. But think about what this author is saying, Stanley. When you're single, someone comes up and says, hey, Corey, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. Hey, how's the job? How's the job? But when you get married, it's like, hey, Corey, how you guys doing? Right? So all of a sudden, I becomes we. So you have these two entities. You have my wife and you have myself. But then you actually have a third entity, which is us, right? It's it. No one actually normally doesn't ask you, hey, haven't seen you in a while, how's your marriage going? What are they asking, though? They're asking about you and her, but they're asking about it, this third entity. But that entity, so think about this. I have a life, and I bring life, I hope, into this marriage. My wife has a life, and she brings life into this marriage. But our marriage has a life. I have to take care of myself. She has to take care of herself so we stay healthy, emotionally, physically, spiritually. But we have to take care of it as well because it's always changing. Our marriage doesn't remain static. It's affected by a lot of different things that's what we'll unroll tonight.
And actually, it changing is a measure of its health. If it doesn't change, then there's something wrong, right? As we foster, we have nurses will come to our house to check on the kid and see, okay, are they hitting their developmental stages? Well, in a way, what we're going to talk about tonight is our marriage hitting the developmental stages? The funny little things that they would do, like, okay, can they jump on one foot and hold a ball? And this one is, can you guys communicate through hard decisions? What happens when you disagree? There's the kind of things you have to decide. Oh, we should be here by now. Maybe we need to go backwards and work until we can get to this next place.
So it's interesting the fact that we are three parts of our humanity, right? So passages are predictable and necessary stages involving the physical, emotional, and spiritual components. Anybody just been really just awful sick? Do you, at those moments of awful sick, do you just feel exceptionally spiritual in those moments? Are you easier to live with, right? Well, you're not. And then you get better. You feel better after being sick for a week, and you feel like, oh, you're a new person, right? You just feel like you forgot what it feels like to feel healthy, or maybe you've gone through, young children, up all night, lack of sleep, and then at some point you get a good night's sleep and you're like, wow, this is a whole new world, right? But so we are, and that we don't have the option of eliminating one or the two or the three. We are all the time physical, spiritual, and emotional beings, and everything around us plays into that dynamic. So on your tables, again, we have these handouts. If you want to follow us, because I think you're going to want to circle back to this as a couple. I think it would be helpful. Or maybe you just have great memories or you just want to take pictures. That's fine. So we're going to cover 5 passages. We're going to do it fast. A lot of material. 5 common passages of love or of marriage. Okay? We're going to just start from the front and we're going to work through to the back. So
first one is this, young love, 1 to 2 years. How many of you are in the 1 to 2 years category? You've been married for 1 to 2 years.
Young love, right.
Just a couple.
Whoa.
Bless you guys. Awesome. There's there's work to be done in that first years. There's excitement, there's fun. You love one another. It's about the two of you. You're just so enamored with each other. That's why you got married, right? You're so in love with the other. But then you start to realize, like, oh man, that other, wow, is that enough? Is that enough? And we have an analogy of a 3-legged stool. And what we mean by that is, 2-legged stools don't work, do they? Why? You need something else to define a plane. In geometry, you understand, like, in 3 legs, okay, now it can sit on almost any surface, a 3-legged stool. So there's the you and there's the me, but there's something else our life has to be about. It just can't be about you and me. After we get married, there's kids, there's work, there's ministry, there's mission, there's other things that we have to give ourselves to. It can't just be about the two of us and our amazing love for each other.
When we do premarital coaching, we oftentimes will ask practical questions, just trying to help people think it through and say, so you guys are about to be married, you're going to move in together, who's going to do the cooking? And they'll say, oh, we both love to cook. Okay, well, how about the garden and the yard work? Oh, we just both love to get our hands dirty.
You can do it all together.
Mowing the lawn. And how about finances? Oh, we're both good at that. So when you're talking to them, like, they're both going to do everything together, like all the time. And then you talk to them a couple years later, they said, I hate yard work. I'm not doing yard work. We're gonna hire this out. We have enough money. So things change, but this third leg is these things that come into our lives that we have to lean on. You have to lean on getting a job, or you have to lean on being faithful, you have to lean on learning, and all kinds of things, being part of a community. That third leg could be a lot of things, but it's what keeps you stable.
Mm-hmm. Next passage is this. I'm sorry, there's tasks to these. I apologize.
There's tasks to each passage.
The task in young love is mold into one family. So, and that is a job. You think this is just going to be easy because we love one another, and then you realize, oh, I love you, and you love me. We've got that figured out. But we can't decide what time to eat. We can't decide how to discipline the boy. We can't, Where
are we going for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I have my idea, and you have your idea, and they have to now join into one decision, one final decision about what we're actually going to be doing.
Has anybody ever experienced tension on just what to do for the holidays when you first got married? Where we're going to spend the holidays? And sometimes we're like, I'm not going anywhere. We're just going to stay here, just the two of us. Because of the complexities sometimes. So this idea is to forge this mold, this identity as a new couple, right? And as a married couple. The second task is you have to overcome the tendency to kind of want or jockey for control. And this is so common coming out of, you've been single, so you have a way of doing things, everything. As a single person, you have a way of eating and what time you eat and what you eat. And, for one person, it's I'm fine eating out of tuna cans. The other person's like, are you kidding me? We're going to put a tablecloth and we're going to sit down. Somebody else would, again, back to the holiday thing, I was talking to a couple once in premarital coaching, and I said, so describe, the perfect, our holidays, we'd all be watching a game, and there'd be a couple screens going, someone's watching a football, someone's watching this, and we'd order out Chinese food, and the other couple was like, what? You what? You watch TV during dinner? Not in my house, right? So there's these like little time bombs, I guess. You have to figure out how are we going to deal with and talk about and really give room for the differences.
Just real quickly, in my own marriage, I come from a family of just 2 kids, and I was the second. My sister is the oldest. And so I was used to never getting my way because my sister was the oldest, and she was the second mom. She just told me what to do, and I did it. My wife was an only child. She was used to always getting her way. Like, what do you want to eat? That's what we're going to eat. You're the only child. And so we got married, and I just was like, well, we just do whatever you want to do. We do whatever you want to do. There was no conversation. There was no leading on my part at all. There was no compromise. And it took years for me to realize this isn't right. And her too. She was just fitting the role that she brought in, and I was fitting the role that I brought in. We're like, we're not becoming one here. We're not making a unit. We're still these separate things. And it took effort for me to speak up and for her to go, oh, fine, we'll do it your way. I don't know if I like this.
My wife and I, we came from very different families of origin. And so in the beginning, I mean, the crazy thing is that we didn't even really think about our families until we had been in a relationship for almost a year, and we got to thinking, we should probably meet each other's parents, And then when we did, it was like, oh, this is interesting.
Why did we do this?
Yeah, yeah. But we realized, I'll speak for myself. My wife can be on a panel later on, but I realized, I really married a different person than me. I mean, that sounds really dumb and right, but I realized, wow, there's a lot of stuff that in a year of being together, we haven't talked about or discovered. And then we get married, and then again, like those little landmines, you step on something one day and you realize, that's probably an issue. The third task in the first few years is to build a sexual union. Now, don't want to lose you here. Stick with me. We're going to do a whole night on sexuality, and we're an adult crowd and so forth, and I want to be respectful. But I'm telling you that this idea here is that God brings us together as a man and a woman, and we become one. That oneness is physical, but it's emotional and it's spiritual. That's why Paul speaks so strongly in the New Testament about the misuse of sexuality, about the mingling of bodies that are not committed to one another in the contract of marriage, how dangerous it is, how destructive it is. And again, you've heard us say that in the old days, the vows would say, and what God has joined together, let no man separate. That was kind of the old school vows. But there was something to that. What does God know? God knows that. Have you ever accidentally just been trying to super glue something and you just, oh shoot. And you realize, and it's too late. It's like you can catch it, but it's already too late. And you realize, and so what do you do? Oh, here, let me help you with that. No, because what's going to happen if someone pulls your fingers apart? There's going to be skin that used to be on this finger, and now it's on this finger, and where the skin was, there's a hole, and to touch it is tender. Well, that's what intimacy is. Intimacy is designed to build a strong union. Any carpenters in the room, any guys who work with wood, or any people and women that work with wood, you're going to know that if you're going to glue 2 pieces of wood together, whether you're making a breadboard or whatever you're making, you can have the best glue in the world, but if the surfaces are not clean, if there's debris, if there's contamination, that wood will come apart right where the dirt was. You can have all the glue in the world, but it's going to come apart because the contamination prevented the 2 pieces from bonding. So the sexual bond is incredibly powerful to help you weather storms. Listen, again, I realize in the room, people have been hurt by sexuality, you've made mistakes in sexuality, but it doesn't change the truth. God invented the sexual organs. God invented the idea. God invented the purpose. And when it's done God's way, it's incredibly powerful. Amen?
I know there's been a lot of conversation around the purity culture in Christianity right now, and let me just say, we all come in sinful. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so we bring in our hang-ups, our past abuse, our dysfunction, our brain, our body. It all comes in with us. And our selfishness and our sinfulness, it all comes in with us. And so we have to then try to fit these things together, and there's this place of being completely seen, not just in my body, but this openness that I've never really had before. Even if I've had sex before, this is different. And it takes a deep commitment. And those first few years, is just like a little kid, developmentally, that first couple years is incredibly important, and it is in this area as well.
And of course, Hollywood has twisted this and perverted this beyond belief. Because in the movies, everything looks so perfect and so natural and so passionate. But if real life, there's all kinds of things that affect us physically and emotionally. And they're almost inseparable. You can't touch one without touching the other. And so there's these rhythms. There's physical rhythms of a man and a woman. There's emotional rhythms. There's life that happens, and it affects the area of sexuality. We're gonna circle back to that whole subject. It's going to be a whole night. We're going to go to the second passage. Realistic love is from 3 to 10 years. How many are in that? You're in that category. Ooh,
Look at that. Wow.
3 to 10 years. Nice.
All you wonderful realists.
Yeah. So the task, there's a couple tasks in this one. The task in realistic love is to hang on after reality strikes. After reality strikes. I think I mentioned it last week, if I'm not mistaken, but Jason and I, we could take this whole marriage series that we're doing and just change some of the wording and make it a series on missions, on being a missionary. Because that's really what it's like. You're marrying a cross-cultural, you're marrying somebody else that's not like you. So guess what? When that happens, you have an idea of how it's going to be. But then there's the reality of how it's going to unfold. In premarital coaching, which we believe in, we require, if you want us to do the ceremony, we require premarital coaching. And sometimes people are like, what? You don't know us. No, we got this. No. But the crazy thing is statistically I've read that you can only really uncover in a conversation around a table with someone who's about to get married, you can only talk about 20% of what's actually out there. Why is that? Because it's out there. It's in the future somewhere. We haven't got there yet, right? We haven't arrived there yet. So there's this thing of when reality meets, or when expectations meet reality, in missions that's called culture shock. I thought I would be speaking the language by now, and I can't talk to a second grader. Ouch. I thought I would be loved more. I thought I would be accepted. But if you can weather the culture shock, that's when you're going to find you become enculturated.
Mm-hmm. I was just talking to one of the young couples actually that are on staff before we started, and we're talking about being on time or not. And in the young love, I was convinced I was going to change my wife to be the kind of person that I was when it came to timeliness. And then in this more realistic place, I'm like, oh no, I need to enjoy the person that God gave me. And realize that we're going to have different views of this, and that's what it's going to be. And that's okay. And we settle into this. There's still going to have to be compromise in times that we go back and forth, and I want to be earlier, and she wants to be later, or however that looks. But there's this, I'm done trying to fix this thing that God gave me. It doesn't mean we shouldn't still be growing. These are passages, but it's not necessarily my assignment to drive you insane.
This is where you learn to try to figure out what are the majors and what are the minors.
Yeah.
We find people that get stuck in the weeds of conflict, which is next week, and they're fighting over really minor things. There's tension over things and this is where the art of compromise comes in. Listen, compromise isn't always bad. I mean, if you're compromising truth, that's another story, but sometimes there has to be a give and a take, like the issue of being on time, like the issues of cooking and bills and so forth. There's this, give yourself some space. You're growing, you've got this far, don't quit yet.
The second task here is recognize the hidden contracts in your marriage. What do we mean by that? Recognize the hidden contracts in your marriage. I don't know if you're a fan of war movies, but or maybe you lived through this yourself, but there's this kind of time-worn plot device where the battleship leaves and they don't actually know where they're going yet because they have sealed orders. And in an envelope is what they're really going to be doing, but they can't open it until they get to a certain position. And then they open it and they find out. And there's a reason for that. They're keeping secrets so that nothing leaks. And what you find in marriage is there's these sealed envelopes that you don't know about. And then one day, years in, you realize, oh, we didn't get married thinking this was the assignment, but we've got the assignment. And now where we thought we were going, we're going to make a turn and we're going to go another direction.
You think about the first 3 to 10 years of marriage. I mean, how many people in the room you encountered things that you had no idea? You didn't plan on them. You try to get pregnant and you can't. An elderly parent all of a sudden takes a turn of unhealth and you're forced to deal with it. A job change. All kinds of things can come into play that can feel like the boat is rocking. We don't know where this is all coming from, but that's like a storm at sea, right? You sail off with good intentions, but sometimes the storm comes up and you have to figure a new way to stay on board without going overboard.
Mm-hmm. I know what I realized too is that I didn't know who I was when I got married. And then I was starting to figure it out along the way and had to have those, like, I wasn't even necessarily being dishonest with you, but I guess I'm someone who sometimes deals with depression or has anxiety or isn't a good communicator, or, all those things. Like, I didn't actually sign up for that, but I did because I signed up to love you no matter what. So here we go.
What's crazy is some stuff, it's like you almost have to be married for it to come to the surface. When you're single and you're dating, I mean, come on, when you're dating, you don't sit down on the first date and just dump out all your garbage, do you? Well, I'm really dysfunctional and I hope you're going to marry me. It's like, you don't do that. You put your best foot. Yeah. You put your best foot forward, don't you? It's like, yeah. And so there's this stuff that comes out sometimes that, okay, I made this commitment to you, and what we tell couples oftentimes, because this can be what's the word? A vulnerable time. We often say, hey, look back. Why did you get into this? Why did you marry this person 10 years ago, 7, 8 years ago? What was it about them? Sometimes in remembering, it helps you recalibrate just a little bit. Helps you rethink things a little bit. So anyway, the third passage is this passage of comfortable love. This is 11 to 25. Now again, these aren't hard and fast categories, but these are patterns. Who's in this? 11 to 25 years. Wow. Congratulations. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, comfortable love. That sounds both nice, but not like a Harlequin romance anymore either. Like comfortable love, I don't know. That sounds like is it giving up? What does that mean, comfortable love? Well, in the earlier tasks of the first 2 phases, you're trying to build a union, and you're working on, like we were saying, this third entity. There's you, me, and then there's the marriage. And now we have a marriage. But there can also be, there's a healthy dependence, and there can also be an unhealthy dependence. We call it codependency, where I'm lost in you. I'm no longer an individual. I don't know who I am. And sometimes that happens naturally through, starting kids. When we start calling each other mom and dad, because that's what the kids are calling you. You're like, oh no, I just called you my mom. Like, that's going to hurt later when we try to be intimate. Like, how do I maintain a me? Like, there's you and there's me, and what does it mean to have a healthy individual identity as well as the marriage identity?
You think about how this plays out in careers and so forth, On a very, very negative side, people who have brought in a ton of dysfunction, here's what it sounds like to us as pastors. This is what it sounds like. I just need to go find myself. I got married young, I didn't date a lot. And so I got into this marriage, and we were passionate, but now we don't get along. And so one of the partners or one of the other says, I just need to go find myself. That's a very, very dangerous thing. It's a super dangerous thing. I get what's being said, and it has something to do with this. Like, I feel like this marriage has just swallowed me up, especially having young children or having children at a younger age, like having children quickly, and it just seems to absorb everything, And this is, and we have to remember again, just as a God who is for us in this novel, we have an antagonist. We have someone who is against us, and so it'll play. The enemy plays on this and says, I've heard it described like this. Sounds. I don't mean to sound silly, but I think my soulmate is still out there. I think my soulmate. Listen, that is not a scriptural principle at all. That is not a scriptural principle at all. Now, I believe that your mate you can be bonded soul and body and so forth. But this weird thing of he or she is out there, and now that Facebook is out there, I'm going to find them. I can't tell you. We could tell you story after story of people who have gone back into their past using Facebook or some other social media and found somebody that they messed around with in high school, and it just shipwrecks. It just shipwrecks the relationship.
And one of the reasons why we say this has to do with the next task, and that's saying our final goodbyes. And sometimes we just don't want to say goodbye to some of the things we're going to say goodbye to in this time. And I mean things like youth. If you've been married this long, I hate to break it to you, but you're not a youth anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Guys, you can still look in the mirror and pull out Atlas, and flex it and sort of force it into shape, but it's not exactly the same shape as high school. And the stamina, the young, guy that was bugging the wife, 3 times a day is now twice a week. That'd be great. Or when will we see each other again? And you're going to have to say some of those things are, okay, this is going to be different. So we don't want it to be different. So we look, well, maybe the marriage is the thing that's made me old. So I'll look for someone that when I was young made me feel this way and think this way. And that is just simply a trap. This is what growth looks like. But also in that independence that we're talking about and trying to grow both the marriage and an independence, it's because the unhealthy codependent can also be a problem for one another. I've actually allowed your dysfunction. I help to enable your dysfunction. We've got comfortable with it. Like, oh, you act bad and I fix it, or it goes the other direction. But it's just who we are. We're no longer trying to become holy. We're just settling for a once-in-a-while happiness. And that is a killer of marriage as well, that kind of unhealthy codependence that divorce doesn't fix. Divorce doesn't stop codependence because it's below the surface.
That word you use, settling, that's again another dangerous thing where you just kind of inside say, well, you know what, it's never going to be good, but I'm just going to live with it for the kids' sake. Or it'd be too embarrassing to get divorced. It'd cost us too much. And so it's a weird sort of a coping mechanism. Well, I'm just going to settle for mediocrity. Listen, I want to just say to you tonight that with Jesus, you don't have to settle for mediocrity. Because Jesus is with you every step of the way, every stage of the way, and His power is available, His resurrection power. Again, I'm not trying to make it sound, like I could tell you stories of couples that have come back from stuff that even in my own natural self, I thought, boy, there's not much hope there. Whether that was tragedy, whether that was betrayal, whether that was just plain old mediocrity and not caring. And we're going to unpack this in more detail when we get into the conflict piece next week. But I've seen people who seem to be stuck, and they've moved to this resignation. This is it. This is what I'm stuck with in my lot in life. And then I've seen people that have looked to Jesus, and resurrection power has come back in. Resurrection power has begun to flow once again, and they remember who they are. They remember why they got there. They remember God. In the Old Testament, a bad memory killed more people than any other disease. More than leprosy, more than war. A bad memory. Whole generations died because they forgot God. And they settled. They settled for sinful existence or mediocrity.
The fourth passage here is renewing love. It's 26 to 35 years. How many people do we have in that category? Yep.
The numbers are dwindling, 26 and 35. Good for you.
I'm 31. How
Good
many
job.
of you guys?
I'm in the next category. Hang on. Renewing love, right? And this has a task. To maintain companionship in unity. This is where I think, among other things, is you turn. It's not the same because unity, when you're young and you're physically different and sexuality is ripping. This stage is like you've got to find things that hold you together. I'll never forget. I had a couple tell me they hit this stage. It's actually a little bit earlier, probably the stage before. And the wife realized, my husband loves to hunt. And this is just one example, so please don't. But she said, I would love to spend time with him, but to do that, I'm probably going to have to go with him. And so she made a decision. She bought sleeping bags and she bought the clothes and she would go out hunting with him when he went hunting every fall. And it was crazy to hear her describe the bond that happened. And I think, it goes both ways. That was just one example. But you have to find ways to reconnect in your new world. The kids are probably on their way out of the house, and this is where you're looking at each other and saying, so why are we together now? Because that common thing that you had with raising children is sort of on the wane, and you have to rediscover new ways.
Yeah, don't underestimate, because there's a looking forward to it at times, like that three-legged stool, right? So the kids were the other thing that we gave ourselves for so long, and then suddenly that leg of the stool is gone, and the tendency for that stool to tip over is very strong. And realize, I don't even know who you are. I know you as the mother of my children or the father of my children, but not, we've lost the love somehow, and it has to be renewed. It has to come back. And it's okay. It's going to be different. It's not going to look the same. It can be absolutely amazing, actually, but it's going to be different.
Think about this. Think about the numbers. Right in the middle is 30. You've been married 30 years. Let's just say you got married around 21, 22 years of age. That puts you at about 51, 52. What happens around then? What kind of crisis do we encounter that society has labeled? You have a midlife crisis. And now, it doesn't have to be a crisis, but one thing is certain, we're all going to hit midlife. You ever notice that the coolest cars, like the Corvettes and the classic cars, are all driven by people with gray hair?
Yeah, the only ones that can afford them.
Yeah. And the only people that remember what they were, But it's just funny. Again, we could write a book on what we've seen people do, but midlife crisis is a real thing. I don't think it has to be a crisis, but I think the passage is real. Because you realize at around 50-something, first of all, I'm not immortal, and I may have already buried one or more of my parents. Some of my friends I used to have when we all ran together, they've died. And you begin to think about, I'm not going to live forever. So you think about things like, do I have enough money? Is my health good? Maybe even your own health has started to come into play. But this is a time where it is super vulnerable to affairs. Super vulnerable. Because again, we don't fight with flesh and blood, but we fight with wickedness in heavenly places in the unseen world. And sometimes that wickedness shows up in a neighbor who thinks you're wonderful. Oh, I tell you what, they just think you're wonderful. And so let me connect these dots real quick. So here's what it looks like. You've kind of drifted into mediocrity, and your intimacy life has kind of gone off to one side, and you're just living with a bare bones bank account. Remember I used that term earlier, a bank account. And you're vulnerable for a bunch of reasons. And then one day, somebody in the office looks to you and says, Bob, I just think the way you lead this company and this team is wonderful. And I just so appreciate how you are just so kind and so passionate. And Bob's listening to this. And now Bob has no sexual attraction yet. But what happens is this person has tapped into something that Bob desperately needs. And it goes both directions. It just goes both directions. They tap into something that we need from each other, but it's almost like the enemy baits us from the outside. You really listen to me? You're just going to sit and listen to me? Oh my gosh, no one ever has done that. You think I'm wonderful? Oh, I haven't heard that in years. So we have to be aware of the spiritual dynamic and the spiritual warfare that is going on. And again, our culture celebrates the crazy. Our culture just celebrates the perversity of, it's just no fun anymore, so just bag it.
I'd say this is also why continuing to date your spouse through marriage is so important. You're not starting from scratch, but we know how to do this. We've been doing this. We've fought for this really hard. We make it a priority that you and I are going to go out and do something together. My kids, when they got old enough, start asking to go on our anniversary trips. I'm like, no. I love you. No. It's not going to happen because this has to be maintained. And when you guys are gone, this is still going to exist. And I have to feed this.
Be creative. My wife and I, we're coming up on 45 years in this year. And every year, I don't care what is going on, we just block out at least 2 to 3 days around our anniversary, and we just leave town. You know, in the early days, we didn't have any money. We couldn't go anywhere. But you know what we would do is all year long, I had this giant glass jar in our closet. We would throw all of our change in that jar all year long. By the end of the year, we probably had $200 or $300 in change, and that would be, that's our anniversary jar right there. Or, you know what I mean? So you've got to plan it, though. There's got to be a plan. And the dating thing, the rhythm of our lives as pastors is super intense, and that's just the way it is. It comes with the territory. So we guard. If you try to find me on a Friday, it's going to be difficult unless something really drastic has happened. Just because, I'm sorry, but this day belongs to us. It's not bulletproof. It's not every single thing. It's not a legalistic thing that we carry. It's something that we look forward to and enjoy, but it's a protection for us. It guards our relationship. And so there's things, and everybody's different. Every marriage is different, but you've got to think it through. How do we deliberately build intimacy, companionship, and unity in the season of life we find ourselves in?
All right, here's our fifth and final one. The fifth passage is transcendent love. Bruce, tell us, what's it like to be in this passage?
I'm just without words.
You're transcendent, I can tell.
The word transcendent took me off. This idea of transcendent love is this thing of, some of it's unexplainable in a way. Some of it is like, you know, we have so much history now, my wife and I, we have so much history together of raising children, of being in ministry, being on the mission field, of having lives together, that I can't even imagine living with somebody else. I mean, it would be like, whoa, that would be such an adjustment. But it's something that has anchored deep, deep inside of us. But you know, oddly enough, I mean, the divorce rate among people that have been married 25 plus years is uptick. It's just crazy the amount of people in our culture that have been at it for 25 and 30 years and they decide to call it quits and go find another. I can't even wrap my mind around that.
Mm-hmm. And what are the transitions? The task here, this first one that we're talking about, is prepare for a transition to retirement. But we have to really talk about that word retirement, because I think we've all seen people that have like some sort of an American dream version of retirement, of just stopping. That's no way to do life. But I should be changing roles, right? Just like a father turns into a grandfather, a mother turns into a grandmother. What does it look like to carry the wisdom of 40-odd years of marriage into this next place in my life? And if that just sits on a shelf, that's a waste. What does a transition to that kind of life look like?
Retirement is a very American, it's a Western idea. And when I use that word retirement, it's kind of this idea, I finally have enough money, I have all this free time, so I'm just going to relax. I love relaxing. But, is that it then? Let's just say you can retire at 65 and you're going to live another 10 years. So is that it? For 10 years you're going to relax? It's just such an, first of all, it's anti-biblical. I just want to go on record. It is anti-biblical. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't relax. And I think you've earned some relaxation and you've earned maybe some travel. But if that's the core of your existence, I just think you have a hollow season of life right now. But think about it another way. You're 65 or you've been married for 45 years. You have a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully wisdom. And maybe you have a wealth of money, and you can move the table, so to speak. You have influence. Maybe in retirement, you give up a position of authority, but authority and influence are two different things. Maybe you've had to give up. You used to be the boss or you used to be the president. You could tell people what to do. But now you have something totally different called influence, and no position can take that away. You have this amazing ability to speak into the lives of other people. And that's, in my opinion, what retirement is about, of one generation bringing up the next generation. When one generation decides to just call it quits and never come back from the beach, I can't, as a believer, I don't even see how that's possible.
The next task is celebrate new opportunities. And this is amending the dream, starting to change it. Because I guess I think of this as, beforehand we do what we have to do, but now maybe I've got to a place where I can do what I can do. There might be, not everyone is in a place, but there might be a place of a little bit more freedom to do anything God calls me to do. A lot of us, we give our life to what needs to be done, the necessary, right? Maybe you didn't plan on staying home and taking care of the kids, but then that became the necessary thing. That was the call of God in your life, turns out. You thought it was one direction and it's another. Or you didn't plan on working construction, but here you are. There was the job and there was the need, and I've done it. But maybe now I've gotten to a place where I don't just have to do what has to be done, but I might be able to do whatever God calls me to do.
Psychologists say that the passage into retirement is as complicated or as tenuous as the passage into marriage or even going through puberty. There's so many changes that happen. But it could be a wonderful season. But like Jason said, there could be circumstances that really we didn't see coming. We're raising our grandchildren for some reason, for example. We have an elderly parent that needs to be taken care of. I didn't have as much money as I thought, but again, you guys, we have Jesus. We have Jesus. The possibilities are endless. The possibilities to serve and be effective in the kingdom of God and live a life that's fulfilled. But you have two people. In retirement sometimes the one person's been out of the house for 40 years, so to speak, from 9 to 5, and all of a sudden they're in the house, and they're like, wait a minute, are you here all day?
Have you got that call from mom? She's like, come get your dad.
Yeah.
I remember that, I was not expecting this. Like, he's just always here.
He can only mow the lawn so much, right? That's why we believe so much in community. If you're unemployed with lots of time and energy, man, come talk to us. We'll hook you up. So we're going to finish. We got to finish here. We're going to move to our panel, and I want to ask our 3 panel couples to move up here and just get ready, settle in. We're going to interview them, hear some feedback from these 3 wonderful couples, and then we'll go to our
While they're
table
coming,
time.
I want to commend you and ask you to keep going, because when we talk about this in passages, it's a weird thing because we're asking the young people to think way ahead, to be futuristic, and maybe some of you that've been through these passages to look back, but keep paying attention, because especially if you're here and married young, these things are coming, and you have to plan for them.
Listen carefully to the people at your table. Here we go. All right. So we have 3 wonderful couples, as is our custom here, and we're anxious to hear about you guys. We picked you because you're all experts in this. We're going to start with the youngest on my left here, my immediate left. I think you're the youngest age-wise, but maybe not marriage-wise. This is Brett and Mindy Kelly. How long have you been married? A little bit about family and so forth.
Oh, it's my turn. I'm Brett. This is my wife, Mindy. We've been married for 10 years. We have 1 beautiful daughter, 4 years old. And as we just found out, another one on the way, too. So
It's out there.
it's out there.
Yeah.
So,
He's making sure.
oh, yeah. Winnie, she was running up to random people in the link. There's a baby in mommy's tummy. I'm like, please calm down.
How did you guys meet?
Brett was my church camp counselor.
Oh, this is like last week. Wait a minute. Just a second here.
I was 17 and he was 20. And we waited until we got to college before we started dating. So, but that is how we met and dated for 5 years and then married for 10.
Nice. Just a random question. Siblings. How many siblings do you have? What are you in the birth order?
You first.
You're counting?
I'm the youngest by a pretty significant margin. I have 2 older sisters. My oldest sister was a senior in high school when I was born, and my middle sister was a sophomore, I believe. So I'm the youngest, young.
Significantly.
Yeah.
How about you, Mindy?
I'm the oldest, and I'm very much the typical oldest daughter.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm the principal, so I like to tell people what to do. But I've got a blended family, so that's why I had to count. I've got 4 younger siblings and a huge age gap. My youngest little brother is a senior in high school, so
Okay.
big age gap.
Nice. Okay, firstborn, married, lastborn. We'll come back to that dynamic. in
Yeah,
just a
please
second.
do.
Yeah, so in the middle here, JD and Trisha, a little bit about yourself. How long have you been married, and give us a little backstory.
All right. Well, good evening. I'm JD. This is my wife, Tricia. I think we have something to share with you. I think it'll work. Look, there's where we met. In high school, we dated one time. The rest of the story.
Yeah, he was my first date in high school. I thought I'd never be able to date. I was the firstborn from an ultra strict family with dating standards that the guy had to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm not dating. Well, he was my first date. Anyway, so that's another story.
But the rest of the story, just give us a little, just throw this out a little
We've
bit.
been married almost 5 years.
That's so funny.
You're like,
I
what?
take a
No.
picture of your face right there. What do you mean?
Well, now the rest of the story. Anyway, we went out one time in high school, and then life happened. We went to separate colleges, went different ways. And I think it was about in 1984. I got a call at about 4:30, 5 in the morning from saying, congratulations, JD, you're an uncle, and I'm an aunt. Click. And the reason that's important is my brother is married to her sister. So that's a whole different dynamic.
Wait, it gets even better. Hang on. No, go ahead.
I was married for 25, almost 26 years, and went through a divorce. And through a series of circumstances, we got reconnected. And I was living up in Bellevue, Washington, and he was down here in Salem. And we talked on the phone probably for about 90 to like 100 hours before we actually saw each other again. And that was several years ago.
How many guys would be willing to talk on the phone for 90 hours before your first date? I'm that guy. Anyway, I was married for 30 years, and my wife died of ovarian cancer. And so I went through the season of watching a spouse die, and I was there when she took her last breath. And it's just been amazing to see how God has worked through that and the grace that he's given me, given us. And this is a wonderful season.
Yeah, we're going to come. Oh, go ahead. We're going to come back. Just hear from this last couple, and we're going to circle back. Bill and Nadia, how long have you been married, and where did you guys meet?
We've been married 21 years. We met in West Africa in a country called Burkina Faso, and I brought home a souvenir. We have two children, a 19-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son.
So I'm going to stick with you guys. Hang on. I'm going to ask Nadia. So talk about changes in the first year of marriage. Just what kind of changes? You guys, why did you marry him in the first place? I mean, honestly, what was it that you said, I want to spend the rest of my life with this guy? And then what was that first year like?
So I met Bill. Hi. I met Bill at an art shop, and I was going to university at the time, and I went there, and the artist had invited me to come do a batik, and I got there. He said it was going to be other students, and I assumed it was going to be local students. So I got there, and it was all white people. I almost went back, but the way I was brought up, I gave my word to this older person, and it would be rude to not show up. So I thought I'll just go in, check it out, and leave. I happened to be next to Bill the whole time, and we were doing batik, and he had made a leaf. So he was looking at his batik on the ground with green hands, and I said, "Oh, a white man with green hands. Ha, 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 ha." But why I married him,
How long after that encounter did you get married?
3 years.
Okay.
We couldn't date because he would stand out. I couldn't say it was my cousin. It's because it's not well perceived for us local girls to go out with white people. You are labeled as a easy girl. So I had to be careful because my family is well known. So anything I do, the next day it's going to be, everybody will know about it. So I had few friends that would go out with us. So people didn't know who is going out with who. We broke up several times because he wasn't sure. He couldn't commit because we just met. But anyway, after 3.5 years, he decided that was it. And I said, yes, because I've gotten to see him display kindness, gentleness. And we had the same friends. And most of the times they were disabled people begging at the stoplight or those outcasts that nobody... Anyway, these people were our people, and that kind of sold. So that's why I married him. But I never wanted to come here. Here I am.
Here you are. Could you? We'll get to you guys. But I want to hang here just a second. So that first year of marriage, just real quick, what did that adjustments besides marrying the white guy? What were the adjustments for both of you?
For me, when I was coming here, it was like, oh, that's amazing. I'm in love. I'm coming to a new country. I don't care where I go. All is cool. Then I got here, and it's like, oh, my goodness. Why did I move here? I'm youngest of 10 kids. I have a whole bunch of nephews and nieces, and I didn't know what loneliness is until I came here. So besides the temperature, it was just lonely.
Bill, so how did you deal with that? Because you get here, you're having to work, but your wife's obviously struggling. I mean, how did you protect one another and nurture the early relationship?
Well, we moved back in with my parents. But I was working 12-hour shifts. And after 9 months, I learned that Nadi was crying every day. And so I had to take her back to see her family. And that was a big help.
Yeah. We'll come back to you guys. How about in the middle here, working back this way? The last few years, obviously, you both had lives and backstory and marriages, and now you're in a new thing. What kind of adjustments have you guys encountered, and where's the grace of God come in that?
Well, there's a lot of changes. I had 3 children. Tricia didn't have any children, so there was the melding of that relationship and relationships, and that was difficult. It was really difficult. And even today, there's some bumps in the road, but we've seen God work in His grace in that area, just as time and familiarity have increased. So that's been good.
Can I ask something there? If you don't, can I? Am I
No.
No, could you just go unpack that just a little bit more? Like, was there tension? All of a sudden, there's this new woman, and she's not mom, but she's kind of mom, and she's your best friend now. And what happened to our mom? And that kind of thing. Did that?
That's a great question. Even before we got married, Tricia reached out to each child and just said, "Hey, I'm not here to replace your mom. Not here to replace your mom, and whatever you want me to be, I'll be that for you. I'll be your friend. I'll come alongside you." Her turn.
I'm sorry. I called him and I said, I just want you to know, it's your choice if you want me in your life. Mm-hmm. That's how I said it, because the bond, and I just had to put myself in their position. What would I feel like? Okay, my parents are still living. My dad's going to be 90 this year. My mom and dad have been married like 60, almost 65 years. what if, you know, my mother died and my mom and my dad got remarried? I mean, how would I feel? I'm older in life. I could only imagine. I could barely imagine how I would feel if I was in my 20s and my dad got remarried. So I just thought I had to speak to the elephant in the room and just say, hey, you know, it's your choice if you want me in your life. And if you do choose that, I'd be honored to come alongside you as a friend. I just, you know, wanted to express that to them. And, you know, of course, you know, a couple, you know, they say, oh, sure, Trish, you know. And I think it kind of took them off guard. But I just, it's just laying down that, you know, that feeling that they might think, oh, you know, someone's trying to come in and usurp that position. No, I mean, I honor that, you know, and that position that their mom has had in their life. And then, you know, it's a dance. I have to look at, you know, they say, oh, life is a dance. Well, it's a dance with JD. I encourage him, and he's a great father and a great grandfather. I mean, we have 5, almost 6 grandchildren now. And he's great with his children. I encourage him to stay connected with them because it's so important that they don't feel like they've lost 2 parents, you know. So I think about that. And the Lord is so gracious because it's not about, oh, they're not accepting me or this or that or the relationship. Yeah, there's tension, but I'm always looking at, okay, Lord, what are you trying to have me learn in this situation? What are you teaching me so that I can just be that funnel? I look at my life as, sorry, I get emotional about it, just being a funnel of God's love and grace to them, and that's all. If that's all that I am in their life, then I'm blessed. So that's it.
You know, the Lord just brought something to my mind, if I can just share it really quickly. You know, we're going to go through, and we have gone through difficult seasons, but just because something's difficult doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Sometimes you have to live and walk through it. You have to extend grace. You have to accept grace. But if it's a difficult situation, it doesn't necessarily mean it's always wrong. And we can certainly say we've had some difficult situations, but we're in the right place.
Yeah, even like with our parents.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. We're going to go to you two. The newest, youngest in the room. You guys both went to university. You got out. They both work here at our school, Crossfield Christian. But here you are with 2 kids. You're, been married less than 10 years. Adjustments. How is things? If this year was a chapter in the book, what would it be called?
Roadhouse. No. No, I feel like if anybody drove by our house at night trying to do something with Winnie, they're like, are they fighting in there? Are they punching people? Get in there. I'm not going to take a shower. You can't make me. I'll come get you. Children have changed a lot, and in a good way, but in a challenging way too.
Yeah, I think we waited 6 years after we got married to even be open to the idea of having kids. And I think that one of the things we were doing was just really wanting to have a good foundation of who we were as a couple, looking ahead at those empty nesting years of just, we want to have that foundation so that we can have something to fall back on once the kids are gone. But also, we wanted to make sure we weren't so selfish. I think both of us kind of go on that selfish line, and having kids forces you to be really selfless. And so we really had to look at if we were cut out to be parents, and especially, we referred to our students as our kids. I've got several in the room right now, and I poured my 20s into this school, and it doesn't look like that in this season because now I'm doing that with my own kid. And so just giving that up. But yeah, she's a terror. I don't know. That's why we're giving her a little brother to do a Jason on her. I don't.
How have your communication, from the time you first got married that first year, has it gotten better? Have you changed styles? Have you learned anything? Kind of really cool little tricks or something that we can...
Yes, it's definitely changed for the better. Absolutely. Probably better for me. Like I've learned a lot of things. I've learned that when your wife says, it's cold in here, what she really means is, get me a blanket right now. Kind of hungry. You need to make dinner right now. Yeah. So she has been much better with acclimating to kind of the male way of communicating, where it's like, I'm just going to tell you what I want because that's the way it works, as opposed to me picking up on those things. And so, Lord bless her, she's much wiser than I am. But yeah, learning the differences of how men and women communicate, groundbreaking for me.
Mindy, how have you helped them?
Well, I'm a great helper. I just tell him what to do. No, I think with us, one of the weird tools that we picked up was to not say, you always do this, or you never do this. And also, it doesn't help either one of us if I just tear him down. And so even with parenting, it's like, I definitely have opinions about what he's doing, but it's not going to get that result that I want if I just criticize him all the time. And so finding things to encourage him about, and then that way when there are criticisms, he's more apt to hear them, because there's still critiques.
Good stuff. Bill and Nadia have been married more than 2 decades now. And what would this chapter look like if you were to name it? Or what your kids are in their, going to university and kind of empty nest sort of a thing. What's the season look like, and how have things changed between you two?
I think I would name this chapter Hand in Hand. If up to now I was to divide it in 3 sections, the first part would be maybe bliss. The second part would be desperation.
We hear you. That's good.
But this is hand in hand.
Can I ask you why the second part would be desperation? What do you mean by that? Just so we don't misunderstand.
How long do we have?
What did it look like?
Desperation because I was struggling to adapt, not only to moving to a different culture, but we're also adapting to marriage in it. And I was trying to fix him. It wasn't working well. So I think I've learned along the way not to fix him. Just stop fixing him. Just let God, let the Holy Spirit do the work, and that is hard.
Well, Bill, from your point of view, you seemed unfixable, but something happened.
One of my friends named a pivotal chapter for me when he asked me, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I'm glad he said that one day when Nadia asked me to do something. And humility, I think, is the key. If both people are humble, you can make it.
Yeah. Just your personal walk with the Lord, obviously totally different cultures. And I don't know a lot of the background, but what about your mutual relationship, individual relationship with Jesus and sharing that? How has that impacted? And then we'll go to the middle here.
So I was born and raised Catholic. So when I came here, we tried Catholic Church, but Bill couldn't take communion in the Catholic Church because he's not Catholic. I want to do church with my family, so that led us to look for other places. We've tried Episcopal Church, and then we landed here. We were going through a crisis when we were searching for a church, and we came here to check it out, and we're still here. So my faith, I knew God existed. I've asked him things that he'd done, what do we call that, the limp genie God type. But being here kind of forced me to go deeper with God, because I was going through some things that my family back home couldn't relate, because they don't know what reality here is like. And here, my friends who care very much couldn't relate to what. The other part of me is like, but the one person that could relate and could understand was God. So I think that's where I kind of started, and it's been an amazing journey. Yeah.
That's great. JD and Trish, if you named the chapter, what would this chapter be? Still in process.
For me, I would call it alive again. When you lose a spouse through death or divorce or whatever circumstance, it gets dark, and the evil one does attack. Boy, does he attack. And having walked through that, meeting Tricia, getting married, I'm alive again. It's wonderful. And God's grace that he's given me has been tremendous, and I'm very thankful. So for me, it would be alive again.
I would call it like redeeming love. In a past life, I grew up in a Christian family, and then I was on this path of searching for truth and going through a series of, the Western religions, comparative religions, and then Eastern religions and all this on someone else's journey. But I was on that, supporting that, as a wife. But then I lost myself in that. And then when I experienced divorce, I can remember, I would say, okay, Lord God, I know that, I challenged God, and I said, I know, you said in your word that all things work together for good for those who are called according to your purpose. I was like, okay, I want to see what you can do with this. And then I went and I did the hard work of going through great Christian biblical counseling and just going through. I'm sorry if I'm going the long road
Finish, it's fine.
here, but I believe we all have. You can call it luggage or baggage in life. We all have baggage, whether or not you go through divorce or loss or whatever. It's part of being human, and it's what we do with it. And so I had this stuff that I wanted to figure out why what happened, because I wanted to resolve it, and I was more committed to the Lord than ever before. And so my relationship with the Lord, it's been wonderful. It's not easy, but it's so worth it. And so, the Lord has brought people into my life. So one of my friends, even like at a gym, who's struggling in her marriage, and I told her, I said, I know it's challenging, but you better fight for it. You have to fight for it. And she loves the Lord, and so it's to be able to speak from a position of going through what I went through, and I had no idea I'd be remarried. I was not looking for it, but I'm so blessed to have this great second chance, and I think it's like the best chance, really, to show God's faithfulness. It's not like, oh, it's, you know, it's glorious and everything. It's wonderful, but it's being able to show God's work in our lives. You know, it's Him. It's Him. So that's why I call it redeeming love.
That's great. Thanks for sharing your stories and your journey in your lives with us. We appreciate it. Give them a hand, would you? All right. Thanks, you guys.